Fred Clarke.
Sorry.
Got it. Let me introduce Fred Clarke, who is a legend in the orchid world. He's been, I think he's actually a Southern California surfer dude at heart, but he has been hybridizing orchids for 40 odd years. He owns Sunset Valley Orchids and specializes in Cattleya hybrids and PAFs and Aussie dendrobiums. In fact, I think the first Maine Orchid Society meeting I ever attended, Fred was speaking on Aussie dendrobiums about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, if anybody remembers that. But he also is famous for his Catasetum intergeneric hybridizing. He's an AOS judge. He has more awards than even he can remember having received for his various orchids. And there are two things that I think are really notable about him. One is that if you buy an orchid from him, you can actually call him up or email him and he'll talk to you, which is pretty unique. And the second thing is that he is responsible for the mini Catasetum hybrids that you all got on Saturday. He bred those. So as you sit back and listen to him talk about Catasetums, think about the questions you have about growing those, because this is the one guy in the world that could probably answer them all. So, Fred, that's the best I can do, man.
All right. Well, that was pretty good, actually. Well done.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, everybody ready to start then?
We are. Go for it.
Okay, I just need you to give me the share the screen.
I made you co-host, so you should be able to do it. You should have that button.
Okay, good. I do. All right. Let's see here. So if this is working, you should be able to see my screen. All right, good. So tonight we're going to talk about Catasetums, and these are the plants you guys just got. And this talk is really going to just focus on Catasetums. There's some other genera in the group Catasetinae, including Cycnoches and Mormotes and Cloesias. But the plants you guys got for the most part are all Catasetums. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And some of the parents used in the crosses that you guys got are going to be in this talk. So you'll be able to kind of see the parental stock behind the breeding. And so Catasetums, how is it pronounced? Well, it's not one of those hard ones to say. It's just Catasetum. Easy enough. Cata from the Greek means downwards, and seta from the Latin means bristle. So these are the downward bristle or the downward hair orchids. Not a very impressive name, really. They're members of the Cymbidianae tribe, which is fascinating to me because Cymbidiums are from the old world, Indochina, Philippines, Northern Australia, Borneo, New Guinea, these places. And if you've ever been there, you realize there's a lot of water between there and here. And in order to make the jump across the Pacific or the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic, is pretty impressive that they would get all the way to the New World. They've been in cultivation since the early 1800s. So the very first sailors that arrived in the New World from England ended up pulling into these estuaries, freshwater estuaries. And this was a good place to be because you had barnacles on your boat and you wanted to kill the barnacles so they're easier to clean off. And if you were of the right mindset, you could see Catasetums growing in the mangroves in those areas. And if you would have collected those plants while they were dormant, that you could have easily carried those back across and established them in England. And they make excellent hobby plants, I think you'll find out. And so Catasetums, they have a huge distribution. In fact, from central Mexico to Argentina is the distribution. And that is a long way, guys. That is a tremendous, there aren't many orchids that have that wide of range. The environmental conditions they prefer are like this: the open areas with lots of light. They like good air movement. They live where they have monsoonal summers. followed by pretty much rainless winters. And so they grow in nature in places that look a lot like this, the open savanna areas, but often you'll see them growing on small trees. But palm trees really seem to be the ideal host for the plants. And when you get up close, particularly in this patch of palms, and you take a good look, that's what you see. And so whenever I see orchids growing in the wild, I'm always impressed by, you know, how they're doing it, right? Orchids have been growing in the wild for millions of years. And so you have a lot to learn by watching and looking at how things are happening. And so on a palm tree, what's life like on a palm tree? Well, you're protected from midday sun, but you might be getting direct light in the morning and afternoons. You see where the plants are established growing on the palm tree. It's right where that leaf joins the trunk. And palms, the architecture of a palm tree is such that any water that fall on the leaves is ducted down the leaf, and then it runs down the concave shaped stem to the trunk of the palm tree. And then that water runs down the tree and delivers it to the base of the palm tree. It's a good design for the palm tree to catch scarce resources. But look where the Catasetum sets up shop. It's the perfect location to intercept the moisture and the nutrients moving down the tree. And on these big palm trees, you can always see little young plants sprouting up the trunk below the large mother plants. And it's always fun to kind of see those baby orchids sprouting and growing in the wilds of nature. Oh yeah. And so am I guess, am I rocking the Crocodile Dundee look? Could be. But it looks like I'm smiling, right? That's actually not a smile. That is a grimace. And I'm grimacing because you may notice here my index finger is kind of hanging down and my thumb is looking a little red. And you might have noticed these red spots on my shirt here, here, all over the place. I cropped the picture so you can't see the blood all over my pants. Well, it's the reason why I'm grimacing is because moments before this, I had impaled myself with a cactus thorn, a rather large one. And in fact, it was fairly gruesome because the thorn went in quite deeply to my thumb and broke off. But it was so deeply embedded, it was impossible to remove it the way it went in. So there was only one choice: to push it all the way through my thumb and pull it out the other side. I really made it bleed a lot because this was the first day of a 10-day trip in Venezuela. I was pretty sure they were going to have to amputate my finger if I didn't bleed it well and get all the infection out. And lo and behold, I had no infection at all. And I think it was because I pushed the thorn through my finger. If I would have pulled it back, it would have broken off, the little barbs, and that would have gotten. So it was pretty good. But the purpose of this picture really is to show you what the landscape was looking like. So this was the height of the dry season, and where these Catasetums were growing. And you can see the dead grasses there and the bush on the right side. You notice that the leaves have fallen off, and you can see the dry seed pods on the plant. So it was quite dry and very hot. And you may notice I'm also just very sweaty. It's probably because I was really gritting my teeth as I was pushing the thorn through my finger, but it was darn hot. All right, so let's see, let's keep moving here. Oh, here are my kids. So this is William, the older one, and Kevin, the younger one. This is about, I don't know, must be 10 or 12 years ago now. And you can see that Kevin here can pick out a good looking Catasetum at around 9 years old. So He was just in my office a minute ago. He's 17 now. So they don't like it when I show this slide. They don't believe that's them. All right, well, back to catasetums. And so palm trees are an ideal host. And when you take a good look at these palm trees, you can see how many plants there are. At every leaf node, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plants on this tree. And then look at this one over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well. And so that's just it's very telling that the conditions that are happening on this palm tree or on these palm trees are perfect for growing catasetums. All right, but what about this? Okay, so telephone poles don't seem like the perfect place to be growing orchids, but there is a plant that is thriving on the top of that telephone pole. In fact, you can see all the flower spikes. Now, telephone poles, as we know, are treated with creosote in order to prevent decay. Now, creosote would not be a potting media I would ever choose to grow my orchids on. And so clearly this telephone pole has weathered, or possibly the guy who treated this telephone pole with creosote wasn't very good at his job. And so what about this? Out of your house, when you've got catasetums growing out of your house, you know, you've got pretty good conditions for growing them. Now, I know orchid plants don't have feelings, but I do. And if I was sleeping in this house, I might be pretty nervous about the electrical job here. I don't see any wire nuts. I just see a 220 circuit and some electrical tape there. Pretty dangerous looking. All right, so catasetums are widely variable. There are over 135 different species of catasetums, and they have a tremendous range of shape, color, and form. The male flowers have pollen ejecting triggers. That's where the name catasetum comes from, is that trigger hanging down below the column. They are sexually dimorphic. Catasetums are very different than other orchids. They have male and female flowers, and they're quite different looking from one another. This is very rare in the orchid world. Almost all orchids have perfect flowers. That means they've got male and female components in each blossom. Catasetums are definitely the easiest to grow, and they can flower a lot when they're well grown. And they also make excellent hobby plants. And so Catasetum pileatum is large and showy. It's a spectacular flower. There can be 13 to 14 flowers on a stem. There can be 2 or 3 or 4 inflorescences produced over the season. Really special. Pileatum comes in different color forms. Here is the albino form. And Carlos there in the background modeling it. This is a particularly fine example of a white Catasetum pileatum. Pileatum, this is one that is probably, I would consider my best pileatum, even though it's not awarded. It is just magnificently formed flower. And if you were to measure from right here across to the widest point on the flower, that is 5 inches across. This cultivar is named dinner plate because its lip is so large. It's reminiscent of a dinner plate. Well, maybe a saucer, but dinner plate sounds more outrageous. Now, there's also a red color form of pileatum, and that's the imperiale form. And here's Carlos again giving a sense of scale to how impressive the flowering can be on these plants. And then there's a close-up showing the detail of the blossom. Next is expansum. Expansum is named for its broad, expanded lip, and you can see how flat it is and almost square-like. It also has beautifully spotted flowers. And right here you can see, contrasting nicely against the background color, is that pollen ejecting trigger hanging down underneath the column there. Next are the color variations of expansum. Here is the green form of expansum. And I was in Hawaii, I don't know, quite a long time ago, and I met a gentleman who had Catasetums because I've been trying to source good plants for years. And he told me he had an expansum that was a green colored one. And so he gave me a division of it. And on the tag, it said Catasetum Midori. And when I bloomed it, I was so happy. It was a very unusual green, shiny green with a yellow callus. And I took it to the judges eventually, and they were impressed and gave it an award. And I left the cultivar name on Midori because it reminded me, or I thought that it meant that it was the green liqueur, that Japanese liqueur, Midori. And what a cool name. It's named after the liqueur. And I was giving this talk, and young man in the back of the room raised his hand and he said, "You know why that's called Midori?" And I said, yeah, it's named after the liqueur. And so he said, well, actually Midori means green in Japanese. And so this is just Catasetum expansum green. Really nothing special about the name. And then there's Catasetum tenebrosum, and tenebrosum has dark, shadowy flowers. It was once called the black orchid, and you can see how dark the flowers are, and then the contrasting chartreuse lips. So it's really not a black flower, but parts of it are, or nearly are. Then there's Spitzii, and Spitzii is a recent introduction into North American growers. You really don't see it very often. And I about 10 or 15 years ago there, I saw a list in Brazil, and I got a consignment of these, and I got a couple plants. And this is the red color form of Spitzii, up to 40 flowers on a stem. And then there's a yellow form of Spitzii, equally beautiful, high flower count. And then maybe the most attractive was this one, this amber kind of color. I also got a Alba Spitzii as well on that shipment of plants. Now I want to bring to your attention the variety of shapes and colors of the flowers. We saw Pileatum in 3 different color forms. We saw expansum in a couple color forms. We saw tenebrosum. We've seen Spitzii. And so just keep in the back of your mind all the different looks of the flower shapes and colors. Then there's Vinasium, the wine-colored Catasetum. How about Cicatum? Cicatum have saccate flowers, or there's a pocket, the pocketed flowers, Cicatum. Cicatum produces very large inflorescences, can be easily 3 feet long with 40 or more flowers. A close relative is Osculatum. And Osculatum is pretty special looking. It's also has a saccate lip. You can see the pocket here. It actually looks like a mouth, and you see the red lips there. And interestingly, the name Osculatum, translated from the Latin, means to kiss. And so this is the kissing Catasetum, Osculatum. Then there's Denticulatum. Denticulatum is a dentate or toothed Catasetum. It was discovered in Brazil by a gentleman named Francisco Miranda. And Francisco told me when he was a grad student, him and his colleagues were trying to figure out what they should do their thesis on. And so as a taxonomist discovering new orchids, that would be a pretty good subject. And so they realized that Amazonia used to be impenetrable. You'd have to walk through Amazonia, but the loggers had been cutting roads through Amazonia to get easy access to the timber. So they decided they would take a road trip to Amazonia, and they discovered 4 new Catasetums. And Francisco Miranda was the author of this Denticulatum. Then there was Mr. Kleber, and he wrote up this one, Kleberianum. Kleberianum has bright yellow lips with tiger stripe petals and sepals. Just gorgeous. Then there's Tigrinum, and Tigrinum is spectacular. It's a small growing plant, The inflorescences are about a foot long, maybe a foot and a half long, 30 flowers or more. And Francisco and I were at an orchid conference a few years ago, and it dawned on me in the middle of the talk that this is called tigrinum. It's named after a tiger. And aren't tigers from India? And don't tigers have stripes? And so at that moment, I figured I needed to ask a question in front of everybody to Francisco, is why did you guys name this tigrinum if tigers are from India and are striped? And he said, well, we're excellent taxonomists, but we're not very good zoologists. And the thing is that in Portuguese and in Spanish, every cat-like animal is called a tigre. You might even have a cat that you called tiger if it was striped. And so the name stuck. Maybe maybe it should have been lepardinum or something like that, referring to the spots. Anyway. And then finally, the last of the four is Soroides. And this dark colored one on the left-hand side is the normal color form. And on the right is the very rare albino color form. Now you guys got those plants and you can see the pot. So to give you a sense of scale, there's the pot of the plants you just received. And here's that flower spike hanging down. It's about 6 inches long, maybe. And there's 45 or 46, 47 flowers in that tight little foxtail. Then there's Fimbriatum, the frilly-lipped Catasetums, the fimbriate, and bright yellow color with bold red spots. Fimbriatum comes in different color forms. How about the Morenianum form, or the purple, the Moreno form, the purple form? Very rare in cultivation. Then there's Barbatum, the bearded Catasetum. Now, ladies, I know that looks soft and supple, and you just want to touch it, but it's not. It's actually more like a bristle brush. And then how about this one, Gladiturum? I've been told that looks like a bay shrimp. I'm not sure I get but a lot of people say that. So then how about Callosum? Just fantastic, beautiful, elegant shaped flowers. And then this one with a green lip. Marvelous. And remember back to Pileatum, Expansum, Tenebrosum, Spitzii, Venaceum, all the different flower forms we're seeing. And look at this guy. Then there's Tabulari. Look at the tongue hanging out of the lip. Remember that? Remember the Rolling Stones? Remember the poster with the lip and the tongue hanging down? Well, they must have stole that tongue right off of this flower. You can really see that there. Then there's Lucius, and Lucius Lucius is a recent discovery. It hasn't been in cultivation very long, and it used to grow, and it grows in the area between Colombia and Venezuela. And that part of the world has been considered a no man's land for quite a while. But there was a peaceful time, and some taxonomists went in there and they found Lucius growing, and it's impressive looking. The plant, the tip of the inflorescence is nearly 5 feet tall and has a tremendously stiff, upright inflorescence. Then there's Sanguinium. So I was giving this talk and I was in Toronto, Canada. And at this point, I put this picture up on the wall, and it was a large group, maybe 150 people. And I heard some laughter, and then I saw some pointing, and I heard people saying monkey face, and more laughter and more pointing and monkey face. Well, I'm the presenter. Everyone's pointing in my direction and laughing. And a gentleman right in the front row, and I must have looked a little uncomfortable, because the gentleman right in the front row says to me, "Not you, Fred, the picture," which only certified my embarrassment in the moment. And everyone started saying, yeah, monkey face. And you know what? I didn't see the monkey face. Now, oh, remember my Crocodile Dundee moment and my bloody finger? Guess what I was holding? Catasetum sanguineum, the blood catasetum. And now I'm getting pointed and laughed at that it's a monkey face. And so I never saw that. Does everybody see the monkey face okay? Yeah, it's no question, right? You can see the eyes and the nostril, the lip and the chin. Okay, I get it now. True story. All right, then how about this crazy thing? So this is albovirans. What a difference from Pileatum and expansum. And then what about this one? Globiflorum. Fantastic. It looks horrific. Look at the mouth. And you know it's a mouth because you can see the tonsils in the back and the helmet. And there's no eyes because this is definitely an alien. There's over 135 different species. I think we've seen around 22 or so. Every one is so distinctive and unique. If all you did was collect Catasetum species, you could have a tremendous collection of several hundred plants that are totally different from one another. Let's talk about sexual dimorphism. You know, we have only seen pictures of male flowers. The male flowers are the only flower form that can be identified, or the only male flowers are used to identify this species by taxonomists. The female flowers all look the same. The male flowers are large, showy, colorful, and distinctive, and the female flowers are green helmets. Both forms produce a similar fragrance. And so here's Catasetum pileatum. It's large, it's showy, it's highly visible, it's very fragrant. These are the males. And here's the female. Green helmet. Here's Lucius, the long flower spike sticking up in the 5 feet in the air. There's the female flowers, green helmet. Here is Tenebrosum, dark and shadowy. Magnificent male flowers. And here are the female flowers, green helmets. And I think we can keep doing this many, many times. Here is Spitzii, magnificent male-looking flowers. More green helmets. This could be done at least 130 more times. But crazy stuff happens sometimes. Occasionally, you'll get a plant that produces male and female flowers simultaneously. And so this is very bizarre, because what is the purpose of evolving to have male and female flowers anyway? Right? It must be to assure that you can't self-pollinate, because if you're male or female, you're not breeding with yourself. And by avoiding breeding with yourself, you won't consolidate your gene expression. If you can only outcross, you're accepting genes from other plants, enabling offspring to be born that might be more suited to deal with environmental change, let's say. So to have male and female flowers on the inflorescence at the same time flies in the face of that theory. But evolution is a gradual process. I'm pretty sure catasetums weren't perfect flowers one day and sexually dimorphic flowers the next day. They had to transition over time. And maybe what we're seeing here is one of those transitory steps. Because you also see stuff like this. So what is this? There is the large showy male flower, and there's the green helmet of a female flower. But this, and if you look closely, you can see the female petal half of a female lip, the half of a stigmatic surface opening, only one trigger, the showy lip of the male, and the petals. And so it's a perfect flower. It possesses both parts. Fascinating. Or what about this flower? This is a perfect flower in every regard. And, I've been growing these things for a long time and flowered literally hundreds of thousands of plants. And this is the only flower I've ever seen that's perfect. Maybe this is what they look like way back in the day, but maybe not. I don't know. There is the anther cap. Underneath the anther cap is pollinia. Right there is the stigmatic surface. You can see the two triggers, the showy lip and the helmet part of the lip. So we just see a snapshot in time of the evolutionary development of these plants. We don't live long enough to really see them changing over time. But I have a funny feeling that's what we're witnessing right here. Are these plants transitioning to being perfect flowered or being dimorphic flowers? All right. So what do the pollinators think of all this? If you have male and female flowers that are very different looking, is not this complicated for the pollinator? And the pollinator is a male euglossine bee. And the euglossine bees are solitary bees, and they can travel long distances searching out their needs. And male euglossine bees collect these floral fragrances, these essences off the surface of the flower, and they place them in these pockets on their legs. And the theory is when they get the right mixture of these essential oils, they become very attractive to female euglossine bees. And so there's a relationship between each Catasetum species and a group of euglossine bees. Both male and female Catasetums have a fragrance. And this is what a male euglossine bee looks like. They're quite showy. If this was an entomology group, everyone would be going, oh yeah, the best insect to study. They're just gorgeous. And here's the euglossine bee that is responsible for pollinating orchids. And here he is landed on a flower. You can see the pollinia is adhered to his thorax. You can see the pockets on his hind legs where they place those essential oils. And here's a female flower. The female flower is helmet shaped. It's a confined space, and the pollinator is forced to crawl up inside that limited space, orienting the pollinia in just the right way so the flat wafer of pollinia enters into the narrow gap. So let's summarize all this. The male flowers are large, showy, and are covered with essential oils. The male euglossine bee only got one thing on his mind, getting the attention of females. And so he wants to do that with minimal energy dispersal. And so the male Catasetum flower is the first place he goes. And that's important too, because if he could go to a female flower and get what he needs, that doesn't help pollination. You need to visit the male flower first. Goes to the male flower, starts wiping up all those essential oils. But if he could collect everything he needed in one visit to a male flower, that doesn't lead to a fruitful union either. So the male Catasetum flower has evolved a shooing mechanism for the fly, a pollen ejecting trigger that when touched with the slightest touch, ejects the pollen with incredible force and whack, knocking that euglossine bee off the flower. A painful hit, soon not to be forgotten, I presume. I think there's a term for this. It might be called negative reinforcement. So that euglossine bee is slapped silly. And its memory is that that flower, although it has the fragrance oil it needs, is not a pleasant place. He flies away, picks up the scent he still needs to get female euglossine bee's attention of the female flower, flies up into the female flower, and at the inside of the helmet, there's just a small amount of those essential oils he needs. And so he doesn't loiter and immediately backs right out, slipping the pollinia down into the slot that is the opening to the stigmatic cavity and flies away. Now, he still hasn't acquired enough of the essential oils to attract female euglossine bees. So fortunately, they're forgetful and they must fly back to another male flower because that has the greatest reward. Starts wiping up the essential oils again, touches another trigger, and whack! Negative reinforced. Remembers that this is a bad place, flies up to the female and repeats this over and over again. It's pretty fascinating to think that this is how they're pollinated. Now, I have a video of this in action, and you have to watch very, very fast. It is around 1/15 of a second from the time the euglossine bee touches the trigger and he's knocked off the flower. So if you blink, you will miss it. It's that fast. So here we go. Okay. Oops, what happened? Let's try this again. All right, sorry here. Bam, over. Here's slow motion. That didn't take long. Here's ultra slow motion. Boom. That ultra slow motion took 15 seconds and it only took 1/15 of a second to actually happen. So that's quite a bit slower. So let's watch again now that you know what you're looking for. Bam, that's it. Slow motion, boom. It's a mystery how there's so much tension pent up behind that pollinia. Researchers have measured pollinia shooting as far as 3 meters from the flower, and the estimated speed is around 300 feet per second of the pollen being ejected. Just amazing. And so this is why you should own Catasetums, right? So you can wow your friends with your knowledge of plant sex. So you can think of the fun over cocktails. You can have a male Catasetum flower in bloom, invite your friends over and have them reach in there and touch that little hair, gently touch that little hair. The pollen comes shooting out so fast, you don't even see it exit the flower. It sticks to your finger, scares the daylights out of you. You're waving your hands around, screaming, carrying around. And then finally, everything settles down and you deliver the punchline, which is you've now been pollinated. Just for this reason alone, you should own these. So hybridization is pretty good with these Catasetums because there's such a huge variety of plant material to work with. You'll never get bored breeding Catasetums because there's so much variety. That makes breeding exciting. And sometimes breeding can be very difficult because you need to have both sexes of flowers. If all you do is get female flowers, you're out of luck. And if all you have is male flowers, equally out of luck. So you've got to be able to grow plants that produce male and female flowers. And oh yeah, starting to get the point here. These make excellent hobby plants. And so here's Catasetum orchid glade. So it's expansum crossed with Pileatum, and magnificent. Orchid glade is a marvelous breeding plant. Orchid glade was crossed with expansum, and that made Susan Fuchs. And Catasetum Susan Fuchs was a magnificent hybrid, beautiful flowers, wonderful yellow color and burgundy spots. Orchid glade was crossed to Tenebrosum, and that made Donna Wise. And the Donnas have been very successful. Lots of awards. These are pictures of all different awarded cultivars of Donna Wise. Then Orchid glade was crossed to Donna Wise and made Mark Dimmitt. Mark Dimmitt lives in Tucson, Arizona. And I think it was 100 degrees there today. The Mark Dimmitts have been quite nice. They have the broad petals, the heart-shaped lip, rich burgundy color, really quite attractive. And about 90% of the cross flowered just like this with these rich dark colors. But the rest of the cross bloomed albino. Remember Catasetum pileatum and the green flowers? There's pileatum in the background of both of Orchid glade and Donna Wise, and I have a feeling you get that green gene coming through pretty strong sometimes. Then there's Crown Fox Voodoo, where Susan Fuchs was crossed with Tenebrosum, made this hybrid. And I named this Sunset Valley Orchids, but I really think a better name for this cultivar would have been Birds on a Wire. Yeah. So then Karen Armstrong. So Karen Armstrong, and we started making hybrids with the miniature Catasetums that were recently discovered in Brazil. Denticulatum and Susan Fuchs makes Karen Armstrong. Pretty nice. Then Denticulatum and Bella Vista Sangria makes Alexa. Really good looking flower. I love the dentate, the frilly lips. Then there's Denticulatum crossed with Portuguese Star. And that made Chuck Taylor. And Chuck Taylor lives and grows his orchids in Edmonton, Canada. So that's pretty far north, as you are aware. And long cold winters there, and he grows his plants indoors in the basement year round and does a beautiful job. Then there's this hybrid of Dentigranum, Denticulatum, and Tigrinum. And I really like this. You know, I make a lot of hybrids, but when you look at this, there's some qualities to this that make it quite beautiful. And I think originally I was attracted to the lip. But now I think it's the shape of the petals and the white background and the red spots that frame the lip. It's kind of like the entirety of it is really attractive. Then there's Milana Davidson, another Denticulatum hybrid with Penang. And the Milanas have been just gorgeous. Here's one with red freckles and a white lip. And then Belle Tarmonto. I made this cross and I sold some plants to a friend of mine in Toronto, and he flowered this one, the white one, just gorgeous, and went ahead and named it. I tell you, that is pretty impressive. It's a Bernie Butts from Toronto. He also grows indoors under lights. His entire plant, his plants have never seen the light of day, 100% in the basement under lights. And he's probably one of the best growers of Catasetums I know. And then there's Sheriff Frank Drew. So this is a true story. I like to make hybrids with frilly lips. And so I made this cross and I sent some plants out to Frank Drew in Virginia, and he flowered the first one. And he was the sheriff of Virginia Beach. In fact, he was the sheriff for 10 or 15 years. And he told me during his tenure in office that no one ever ran against him. And I have a feeling it must have been his name, because if you're a politician with a name like Frank Drew, how wholesome and good sounding name is that? And so he bloomed the first plant, and he sends me a picture and he says, I said, well, I think I should name it in your honor. Let's call it Frank Drew. That sounds so good. And he Answers back, no, let's call it Sheriff Frank Drew. Well, fine. What's your, it's whatever you want, Frank. And so Sheriff Frank Drew was. And a couple of years ago, I was at the Tidewater Orchid Society in Virginia Beach, and I had plants of Sheriff Frank Drew for sale, and everybody in the club was fighting to get a plant of the sheriff. And so Frank was pretty honored by all that. And then here's a close-up of it. And then here's Fong Sing. And so Fong Sing is Jose Abalo and Orchid Glade. And the Fong Sings have been magnificent, beautifully shaped flowers. Oh, remember monkey face? So look at Jose Abalo here. You see the eyes and the nostrils and the mouth and the chin. So Jose Abalo is a hybrid with Catasetum sanguineum. And look how beautiful the next generation is, though. You got rid of all that monkey face looking stuff, turned the flower over, and beautiful, rich color and shape. And then finally, my mother's namesake. This is Louise Clarke, and thanks to her, that's probably why I'm growing orchids, and Donna Wise and Susan Fuchs. And the Louise Clarks are really spectacular. They've done quite well with the judging program, and the flowers are very large and showy. All right. So how do you grow these guys? You've been wowed by the species. You've been blown away by their pollination. You've been shocked by the beauty of the hybrids. And so how do you grow them? All right. So when in active growth, you need to water like a monsoon. They live in monsoonal areas. You want to fertilize every time you water with a half a teaspoon of fertilizer in a gallon. You need to use an open, well-drained media because you're going to water a lot. You repot and divide just as the new growth is starting. And you don't begin to water until the new growth has new roots that are 3 to 8 inches long. Now, this last point, I am going to repeat 7, 8, 9 times in the next 5 minutes. So it's very important. So Catasetums prefer conditions like this, where the summer temperatures are about 80 degrees. Hotter is okay, a little cooler is okay too, but 80 seems to be the magic number for growth, with summer low temperatures not below 60. In the wintertime, since they're dormant, day temperatures really aren't that critical, they're not growing, but you'd want to make sure your temperatures stay above 50, but preferably 60 is a better temperature during dormancy. They like bright light level when they're in active growth, and humidity in the 80 percentile for optimal growth. In nature, it's hot and wet in the summer and cool and dry in the winter. They've evolved under these circumstances, which means in order to grow them properly, this is what you need to do. They're required by the plants. Watering begins when the roots are 3 to 8 inches long. Watering too early, that is before the roots are long enough, will discourage root growth and possibly cause bulb rot. And most of the prior year's roots die during dormancy. That's why you follow this advice, because you want the new roots to grow out, and you don't want to water them too early because you need the new roots to put on a good show, because they are what is going to replace the prior year root system. Now, okay, so here's a plant. It's in a pot, and you can see the pseudobulb. There's a pseudobulb, or what is a pseudobulb, right? A pseudobulb is a water storage vessel. And so you could call it a tank, I guess. And so here the pseudobulb is full. So if your tank is full, can you put more in it? Of course not. So in plant speak, this plant is communicating with you. It's saying, my tank is full, but you look at it and you say, hey, there's a new growth. And the new growth is a ½ inch long. The tank is full. There are no roots. And the photosynthetic surface area of that new growth is nominal. If you water this plant now, you probably get water in the middle of that new growth. And probably at the same time you water, you'll flush a bacteria spore right in there. And the weather will switch to dark, humid days. And it might cause rot. Don't water at this stage. The chance of rotting out the new growth are high if you get it wet. Now, a month later or so, the new growth is elongated considerably, and you can see green root tips emerging from the base. Those green root tips are not 3 to 8 inches long yet. This is when you get ready to water. You move the plant closer to water. You buy a new hose. You mix up fertilizer. You do anything but water the plant. The roots aren't ready. Several weeks later, those same roots have drilled down into the potting media. You can maybe see roots coming out the drainage hole, jumping over the top, and possibly the last couple roots here are emerging. This is when I start to water. And when I start to water, I start slowly, and I start with fertilizer, gradually increasing the frequency as the plant gets larger. Once you start to water, the plant enters into a rapid growth stage where you can almost measure the changing plant stature on a daily basis. Certainly on a weekly basis, you'll measure over 1 inch of growth a week. Then the plant blooms and you're impressed. You bring it to the meetings that we're going to shortly have in another few months when this all gets behind us. Everyone's impressed. And then Thanksgiving rolls around. The days are getting shorter, appreciably shorter. The rainy season in nature is stopping. The plant is communicating with you. It's saying, look, I'm losing my chlorophyll. My leaves are yellow. If I haven't, and so that should mean to you, if I have very little chlorophyll, what do I need water for? I can't photosynthesize. So the plant is telling you back off on the watering. Then around Christmas or slightly before, your plant should look like this. Leaves brown, hopefully 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flower spikes from the prior season, and then no water on your plant until the roots again are the right length to begin watering, 3 to 6 inches. Now, I know this made sense to everybody and you all listened intently, but I also plan to show you why I say what I say. Remember my Crocodile Dundee moment and my impaled finger and monkey face in Catasetum sanguineum? Well, there it is, growing on the ground in Venezuela prior to me removing it from its home. Now, I was impressed when I saw this plant because I realized that these live in a semi-deciduous forest, which means leaves drop off the plant seasonally at the beginning of the dry season. That leaf litter builds up year after year after year, creating a rich organic compost, similar to the detritus that is trapped in the leaf on the palm tree. This plant has been growing for quite a while. You can see that there's 11 pseudobulbs there. That means the plant is at least 11 years old, probably closer to 20. So I pulled the plant out of the ground and I was shocked to see a new growth. The ground, as you can see, look how cracked the soil is. It's bone dry. It hasn't rained in months. And look at all the white roots that have grown in anticipation of rainfall. The roots didn't grow because of rain. The roots grow ahead of the rainy season. And now you can see the prior year roots here. See these muddy, soaked roots? These are dead roots. See the fiber here from the prior year. You flip the plant over and you can see the expansive root system that is growing ahead of the rainy season. You can see the dry nature of the soil. And if you look closely right here where it's really well focused, you see the earthworm castings. All that leaf litter that falls on the ground is excellent food source for earthworms. So when the ground is wet, earthworms tunnel up through the soil, tilling it, feeding on that organic matter, depositing earthworm castings right around a brand new root system that is highly effective at picking up moisture and nutrients as soon as it rains. So the growth season is only about 4 or 5 months with catasetums. That's all the time in the year that they're growing. And so they grow their roots so the roots are ready to receive moisture and nutrients. Then the rains come and wham, that root system sucks up all those nutrients and moisture and grows fast and blooms well. This is how you grow good catasetums. And this is why I say what I say. You wait to water till the roots are 3 to 6 inches long, simulating this phenomenon. Here's my greenhouse in the summertime, probably July or August, looking luxurious and beautiful and green. Here's the greenhouse just a few months ago in January. You can see all the leaves are turning yellows. Many of them have fallen off. You notice I still have some green leaves. Even though there's green leaves, I still have not watered these plants in over a month because I am forcing dormancy. Now, just because the plants are dormant and you haven't watered doesn't mean they don't bloom. This shelf here has got all plants in flower. There's flowers and flowers and flowers and flowers and flowers. This shelf here got plants with flowers in the middle of January, blooming their heads off with no leaves. So you wait to irrigate. I think I said that 9 times. Occasionally I say it more than 9 times. Till it's 3 to 8 inches long. You want to use a well-drained potting media because you're going to water like a monsoon. You want to fertilize with a 1/2 teaspoon of fertilizer in a gallon of water every watering. We saw how those plants living on the sides of the palm trees lived where the detritus dammed up on the trunk and how that sanguinium was growing on the ground and all that rich organic compost. Lots of fertilizer. These plants will appreciate that. You want to reduce irrigations at the first sign of leaf yellowing, simulating the end of the rainy season. Remember, these plants have to have a wet season followed by a dry season. Don't be fooled in the fall to keep watering. You want to slow down on the watering to tell the plant, get ready for dormancy. You want to stop watering when the bulbs are leafless. That's around Christmas. And you want to repot and divide just when the new growth is starting. And did I mention yet? They make excellent hobby plants. And thanks to these guys, and of course, thanks to all of you who will now be growing and flowering beautiful catasetums. Thank you very much.
So, Fred, can I jump in and ask a question?
Absolutely.
The mini catasetums that you sent us are generally smaller growing, obviously.
Yeah.
They're in, I think, like whatever, 2.5 or 3 inch pots in moss. As they start growing, would you pot them up or would you leave them in those small pots?
I would leave them in those pots for this season.
So the plants are going to outgrow the pots pretty quickly. So you're going to want to put those pots, like slip them into a clay pot or something so they don't fall over.
Well, I wouldn't pick a larger pot. If you had a clay pot, I would transfer it from the pot it's in and just slip it into the same size clay pot.
Right.
But I might recommend at this point, you just leave it in that pot for this year.
Okay.
And then next year, pull it out when the new growth is just starting, pull the plant out of the pot, add more moss around it, and shifted up one size to a 4-inch pot.
Okay. So second question, we're talking about Maine winters here.
Mhm.
And you're talking about humidity in most Maine houses in the winter being like around 20-30% maybe inside.
Yeah.
So how do you get these things through a winter without they're just desiccating and drying up?
Well, let me see if I can do something here. I want to show you a picture.
Because your website has some pretty interesting things about that.
Yeah, so let me go to 1 second here. Go to my photos, my pictures.
You'll have to share your screen again.
Yeah, I will once I get to the once
Yeah,
I get to the good picture here. One
I
second.
tried one of the ideas, and it worked pretty well. Depended on the shape of the pot, we'll put it that way. The round pots did better than the square pots.
Yeah, all right. Now, how come I can't find it? Where's my pictures? All right, almost there. Bear with me.
Because I think you had a system for putting them in with a little sort of glass of water or something to keep some humidity around them.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you that now.
Right.
There
So,
you go.
Unless you had a square jar, it wouldn't work so good, right? And so try to grow your catasetums in round pots. And this is a very effective technique. This was invented by a grower in Calgary. And they had trouble overwintering their plant. You know, they got the heat on day and night. Well, almost as long as you guys might, right? And so, and super low humidities. And so what this does is it creates a super humid environment around the root zone without wetting the plant during dormancy. And it's a highly effective technique. It also gives mass to the pot to prevent it from tipping over. I started doing it here about 2 years ago as a trial, and I just left my plants in there, and they do great. I mean, I had some pretty sickly looking plants that I was trying this on, and it works beautifully. You don't want the water to touch the bottom of the pot. Remember, these plants are epiphytes. They don't grow standing in water. They might grow getting wet every day, but they're not in standing water. You know, the side of a tree is well drained. It's not a pond. And so you want to have a separation between the bottom of the pot and the bottom of the water, just an inch or two, but it really works good. So, I mean, it works so good. It's almost, you know, it's almost too good to be true. Right? You know how some things are like that. If you've been struggling with catasetums, man, oh man, this might be the thing that brings you back to being a catasetum grower. So
Why not just a humidity tray underneath it?
well, you can do that too, but the humidity is fleeting, and it blows around with the air movement. And so this way it forces the humidity through the media, and the moss doesn't get crunchy dry. It always has like a 50% relative humidity level, which is just what the roots need to assure the bulb stays plump during the long winter rest.
That's what I did. The pots that were round survived and are doing nicely. The pots that were square, they just shriveled and I couldn't bring them back. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure if I get any more, they're going to be in round pots before winter hits.
So Fred, the way to think of it is if you've got a catasetum growing on a palm tree in Honduras or Nicaragua or Venezuela, even in the dry season, there's dew every morning.
Maybe not. It's pretty dry.
But there's some moisture in the air, right?
Oh, there's some humidity. Yeah, well, there's relative humidity. So on that, you know, my Crocodile Dundee moment there, you know, and so those plants I pulled out of the ground, you could see the ground was dry, crunchy, crusty, dry ground.
Yeah.
The relative humidity would have been 60, 70, 80%.
Okay, and that's the key.
during dormancy, that's why that if you've got a super low humidity environment and you're running because you're running a lot of heat in the house and it's 10% humidity, using that method works great.
Yep.
Now, some people, will water their plants if they're not using that technique, and that can work, but it's outside of my experience to recommend that. So I live in Southern California, you guys. Okay, so this is a desert, so it may not be as cold, but it's not much. I think you have more humidity right now than we do, and so it's probably 15% humidity here. We had a total of 6 inches of rain for the entire year this year. So
What advice would you give to somebody about mounting them?
you can also mount them. They do well mounted. You need to adjust the watering accordingly, though, for mounted, right? One of the reasons why I like to use the sphagnum moss is because I think watering is very important, and I insist that I water this nursery. So if you have 400,000 plants and they're all mounted, that's a lot of watering because you got to do it every day. And so if you've got the time availability to water mounted plants, absolutely put them on a mount, particularly the species, that's kind of how they grow in nature anyway, on the sides of trees and on the palm trees. But you notice on the palm trees, there's a lot of water that's around that root system there when it gets wet. So you might want to make sure you can water your plants at least daily when they're in active growth.
Fred, I have a culture question. You mentioned that in the spring you would repot them, but when you repot them, you still would not water them. Is that correct?
Because it's all about the length of the roots.
Right.
Now,
so you repot them and wait.
Yeah. So in the case of the plants that you guys just got, in the spring, when it's time to change their pots, I would not remove the potting media. I would leave the existing potting media on the root system, add more moss around it, and slit pot up one size. When you could pull them out now, I would wait a month or two, and you'll be able to slip the pot right out of the plant right out of the pot, and the root system will be a tight mat. And you'll see that the moss is only about an inch, maybe 1.5 inches deep, and there's a couple styrofoam peanuts in the bottom of that pot. It's not plugged to the bottom with moss, and that's because I want it to dry out fast, but stay wet and dry out fast. That's the key. That's what life is like on the sides of those palm trees. When it rains, it gets really wet, but then with all the air movement, then it dries out fast, and then it gets wet again and dries out fast.
We just got these beautiful plants on Saturday. The roots obviously are very small, like 1 inch or so. So should we not water them for a few weeks?
I think that you could, I watered those plants actually a week before I shipped them. That was the first watering I had given those plants. When you have seedling plants, the roots are more the 3-inch length. When you have mature plants, it's more like the 6-inch length. So I think you could start watering those plants now, but you want to remember, you want to have a wet, dry cycle. And so mix up 1 gallon of water with fertilizer in it, and maybe take a shot glass and pour a shot glass of water through the pot, and pick the pot up right after doing that. And you can feel how heavy it is. And then each day pick it up, and you'll know when it's dry, because it'll feel really dry, and then water it again. And then in the summer, when you get into July, you can water the plants every 2nd or 3rd day. They don't care at that point. Always with fertilizer, though. Always. Well, if you got 2, anybody get 2? You should do a test, and one fertilize every month, and the other fertilize every watering. And I can assure you, oh, there you go. About halfway through the test, you'll say, "Forget this! I'm fertilizing all my plants all the time." Yeah.
So Fred, we have one of our members has a winter home in Vieques, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Those plants should be mounted on a palm tree, right?
If you live in Puerto Rico, you probably don't even have to do anything to your plants. You just put them on a palm tree.
Fire them on a palm tree.
And then admire them all. Well, the problem is you're not there when they're growing. And when you get home, right? Because you're there in the winter, aren't you? And you're at home in the summer, or I don't know, whatever your schedule is. But I have a lot of Canadian customers love Catasetums because, as you know, the day after Christmas, all the Canadians pack up and leave town and go somewhere warmer, and they can just, long as they have the heat on in the house to 10 degrees C, right? Then they can leave and the plants will just sit there all by themselves for 2 months while they're gone. And so either way, it works.
Fred, one other question. You were talking about the male and the female flowers. Is there a way to guarantee that you get male flowers and not the green helmets?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. So I'm obviously promoting how to grow your plants the best possible way, right? Because I believe that's what we should all be doing. We're orchid hobbyists, aren't we? Don't we want to be the best growers we can be? And so there's a conundrum though. So let me say this. So Catasetum plants that are well grown, that means that they've had a long time with ideal growing conditions, become large and robust. Large, robust plants are most likely to be female.
Oh,
Because you have to carry a seed pod to term throughout the dry winter dormancy. So if you weren't a big, robust plant, you might perish in that endeavor. And so only plants with enough stored resources produce female flowers. Males, on the other hand, can be plants that are poorly grown in the shade, immature plants. It doesn't take much energy to produce pollinia. It takes a lot of energy to carry seed pods all the way through. And so what I do is when I need female flowers, or I have certain plants that I like to use in breeding. And so I let those plants get large and robust, and I don't divide them, and they get mini bulbs, and they're more frequently female. So that's how I do it. But I have this year on my list, I have Cycnoches cooperi. And last time I offered cooperi plants was 9 years ago, because I had not had male and female flowers that I could cross together. I had to wait 9 years to get this cross because it can be maddening. And so, yeah, but that's what it takes. So if you're an excellent Catasetum grower and you have large, robust plants, you'll get rewarded with female flowers. And if you're an okay grower, you'll probably get more male flowers. So
Fred, we probably ought to let you go. We've had you for a long time now, unless there are any other burning questions. And then we'll see the flowers we get, and then we'll send you some pictures.
Yeah. Gene, do you have a question? You have to take yourself off mute. One last question. Uh-oh, Gene. You're still muted, unfortunately.
Muted, Gene.
Unmute yourself, Gene.
When does it bloom?
When does
When
what?
does it bloom? Does it bloom in the middle of the summer? Or does it bloom when the greens first start?
You're talking about the Catasetums you just got?
Yeah.
Which one did you get?
Well, I got one called Melina Davidson Hurrah by Karen Armstrong. Very nice.
Well, if you grow that plant well, you will be able to flower that probably by August or September.
Great. Thank you.
That'll be
at our meeting, everybody brings the Catasetum that should be in flower at that point, and we'll see what the hell we have.
Yeah, the first person to bloom one should get the prize.
There you go.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you,
well,
Fred.
listen, Fred.
Thanks very much.
Great.
All right, thank you guys.
It's
We'll be
very
back.
Stay
entertaining.
safe out there.
All righty. Thank you. You guys too. Good to see y'all.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.